in the previous class we had left off till the very beginning of Orientalism. I was about to begin. I said that I would be beginning with Orientalism in the previous class. So let's see what Orientalism is. First of all, you must understand that Orientalism and post-colonialism or all these words that you are hearing, all these new terms, colonialism, post-colonialism, Orientalism, you will be hearing some other words in the future as well. In the next class I will be introducing some very interesting and some very new concepts of these theories. So these are not, it's not that that these are all separate from each other. It's absolutely not. I have already explained the relationship between colonialism and post-colonialism, and Orientalism is a part of the overarching theory that is commonly known as colonialism. So Orientalism is a part of it. However, it differs, or it is different from the colonial discourses that we saw in our last classes. They are a bit different, of course, because we have a new person here who is approaching colonial discourses. You should be able to understand this phrase by now. So this person is approaching colonial discourses in a novel way, in a new way. This way he calls Orientalism. This person is Edward Said. It's not Said, it's Said, Edward Said. And he is the one who is publishing this book. And in 1978, he is the one who is publishing this book. And he's calling his method, his approach to the colonial discourses, he's terming them as Orientalism. Said's Orientalism is a study of how Western colonial powers of Britain and France represented North Africa and Middle Eastern lands. Said was Edward Said was born in Palestine, so you can understand his interest, his particular interest in this part of the world, of the Middle Eastern lands and then of North African lands. But of course, you might just ask, then how can we apply Orientalism to literature or to literary studies or to colonial discourses of other parts, of other geographical areas, of other countries, of other continents? So the reading of theory does not entail such rigidity. তোমরা যখন theory পড়বে, you will see that theories, literary theories, but of course in our case we have literary theories, but then again literary যখনই বলছি, then the social, the temporal, the spatial contexts all are included in this literary portion. So when you are reading literary theory in general, the theory is the set of alphabets that we learn from the very beginning. Like we have 26 alphabets in a series of alphabets. But your application of theory in any piece of literature or in any piece of art or in your life, this application of theory, they are like building of words. So you can make, it is like you can make innumerable number of words in a combination, with the combination of all those 26 alphabets. So application of theory are not restricted to the origin of these theories, because anyone who is inventing or discovering or innovating, rather I should put it like that, or innovating a literary theory, adding to a literary theory, what they are doing is that they are making new words. It's just an analogy that I'm drawing. They are making new words from the set of alphabets that they already have. So when you are reading an Edward Said, or when you are reading Frantz Fanon, or when you are reading Ngugi wa Thiong'o, or all of the post-colonial theories that you will learn about, you must understand that these theories are not restricted to their reading. You can outreach them. You can use those same teachings, the teachings that they have propounded, and apply them to any text at hand, and apply them to any facet of your life that you want. Of course you will have to prove them. You cannot just say that this is a post-colonial text and end it like that. You have to prove it. So for Said, his Orientalism or his approach to colonial discourses, they were limited to the Middle Eastern lands. But of course he himself does an analysis of Kim in a later book which is called Culture and Imperialism. However, it is this book, the Book of Orientalism, published in 1978, that was hugely influential in these post-colonial studies, or in the study of colonial discourses. So Said's Orientalism was a study of how Western colonial powers, that is Western colonial powers as in European powers, of course, of Britain and France, because French were also, they were also colonizers. So Britain and France represented in North African and Middle Eastern lands in the late 19th century and early 20th centuries. Although Said draws on other, or he uses other historical moments also. So the Orient for Edward Said, the Orient is this collective noun that Said uses, to refer to these places. Particularly for his study, he is concentrated upon these places. But generally speaking, or very correctly speaking, Orientalism refers to the sum of the West's representation of Orient. So anywhere, or in any moment of history, or in any place in geographical context, when you use the term the Orient, it is actually the collective noun, or a concept, or an idea that refers to how the West, that is the French and the British colonizers, how the West, they represented the Orient. So if for Said, that is, those are the Middle Eastern and the North African lands, Orient is also India. In our context, in the context of Kipling's Kim, this Orient is India. The Orient is all that we know as not West. Everything that is not West, by West we understand two continents, particularly the Europe was in the beginning. Even now, if we refer to Europe as the historical West, then we won't be wrong. And now we have America. So everything that is not the West is the Orient. Okay, so the Orient is the collective noun that refers to the West's representations of the Orient. And this is Orientalism, I'm sorry. Orientalism is the sum of West's representation of the Orient. So this is a system, an ism that Said terms or coins this phrase in order to refer to how he saw the West's representation of the Orient. And Said looks at how Orientalism still survives today in Western media reports of Eastern, especially Arab lands, despite the fact that colonization, formal colonization, has already been wiped off. These countries are all quote unquote so-called independent. However, as I had already said in the last lectures, that the representations, they remain through language, by the use of language and through literature. So these representations are immortalized, they are eternalized, they are made permanent, and they are still taught to us. It is circulated, they are distributed very, very crudely, or very practically speaking. If the word that we use to refer to anyone who looks like a Chinese, what is the word that we used? That word has been outlawed. It is an illegal word. If you use that word, and of course in our country maybe nothing will happen, but nonetheless, if in a proper law and order country, if you use that word, then you will be imprisoned. So it is because the law was important, because these representations are still there. You will find numerous accounts of Nepalese, Bhutanese, Northeastern students living in India, who will recount stories of how they have been disrespected, how they have been dehumanized because of some literary agent's representation of them as a chinky. They have been called by names of food that they eat. It may be funny in certain contexts, but nonetheless it is not funny for them. So it is for them that we have Orientalism, we have the theory of Orientalism, and in films you will find this, in the sphere of practical life you will find that these representations still remain, they are still here, and that is why Orientalism is very, very relevant even today, even though colonization per se, colonization proper, or the rule of the colonizers proper, has been wiped off, does no longer exist. This reinforces the point, this reinstates or highlights the point that the machinery of colonialism, that this entire system of colonialism does not simply disappear as soon as the colonies, as soon as the lands become independent. Said shows that how these modes of representation common to colonialism have continued even after decolonization and are still very much a part of contemporary world, of the present world. Now, why have I written the names of these two people? Why is it important to know who influenced Said? It is important because the ideas or the concepts that have been propounded by particularly these two people, Gramsci and Foucault, their ideas have been relevant in certain fields, in certain schools of thinking that are not technically a part of colonialism. But the fact that these people have influenced Said in his writing of Orientalism, in his forming of this theory of Orientalism, tells us that Orientalism or colonialism as a theory is not only limited to reading of colonial discourses. For example, Gramsci talks about Antonio Gramsci. He's an Italian. He was an Italian philosopher and a political writer. Gramsci's idea of cultural hegemony. The fact, cultural hegemony, very briefly and very simplistically put, is the propagation of or maintenance of power by intervening within the culture. It is the culture that power owns, not the people, not the means of production, not lands, but culture. Culture, which is the representation of all of these things put together. So, and hegemony means power. So, cultural power, whoever is at the rule, in this case, the colonizers are ruling. So, the colonizers, they have power over our culture. And how does this power come? From where does this power come? This is where Foucault comes in. This power comes from owning of knowledge, knowledge of all spheres. The white, so-called self-proclaimed superior race, they proclaim that they have a better knowledge of our history. By our, I mean India, in our personal context. They believe that they have a better knowledge of our history. They believe they have a better knowledge of how to civilize us, of how to educate us, of how to make us live. They believe that they have a superior knowledge of religion per se, that our religion is superstitious, that our religion is chaotic, anarchic, and therefore it is necessary to convert us into Christianity, which is supposedly, allegedly, again self-proclaimed. It is a superior religion. It unites, and it is of course better off than all the other religions, the plural religions that India practiced then and it still practices now. So that is why Gramsci and Foucault, they are the people who have influenced Said. And I mentioned their names because colonialism or the reading of Orientalism or application of Orientalism is not limited to these texts that you will read or you will learn about in the course of this assignment. They can be applied, or they can be found out, or they can be scrutinized, criticized, or how should I put it, they can be, well, reamed out, they can be made from any other text, any text that you put your finger on. You can apply it because the influencers of Said, because the points or because the texts which influenced or pushed Said into forming of this theory, they were inclusive of the society. Gramsci was a Marxist, so he was talking about the social class relation. Foucault was a sociologist, he was an anthropologist, he was a scientist, he was a literary activist, he was a political activist, or he was a post-structuralist. He influenced deconstruction. Foucault is one of the most influential figures that you will ever have in the course of literary history. So these are the people who influenced or pushed Said into forming this theory of Orientalism. So this is a universal concept which is not just limited to Middle Eastern lands or North African lands, but every corner and every crevice of this world. And that is Orientalism. Wherever you find representations, rigid representations made, putting it very more correctly, stereotypical representations, very typical representations. এই যে তোমরা ধরো একটা মুভি দেখছো, বাংলা বই দেখছো বা হিন্দি বই দেখছো, সেখানে দেখানো হচ্ছে বাড়ির যে বউ সে খিটখিট করছে. This is a typical representation of housewives. You think, are you ready to believe as educated intellectuals that all housewives are like this? No, they are not. Some are, but they have stereotyped in order to genderize, in order to show. Of course, that entails a separate discussion altogether. কেন এরকম ভাবে দেখানো হয়? Nonetheless, I hope that you can understand. So they show it like that in order to keep the role of the housewife rigid and constrained and restrained within this circle of stereotypical representation, so that if you move out of it, so that if the description of a housewife moves out of this circle, she becomes extraordinary, she becomes special. Even that can be criticized, because anyone who does not fall into this circle of stereotype does not be treated treated in special terms, because she is a very conventional normal person. So is that housewife. Our challenge is to remove or to question those stereotypes of representations that continue to exist without any logic, without any rationale, because it supports the logic and supports the rationale of that which is in power. In the case of the housewives, it is patriarchy. In the case of the Orient, it is colonialism. Am I clear? Does anyone have any question to ask? Please ask now. Okay, so I will move on then. If you have any question in between, just stop me and ask it. No issues. Next, now what we are going to learn is what is Orientalism. This is very important, because this is the particular tenet of colonialism that we are going to apply on the novel. Of course, we are going to read some other perceptions as well. There have been criticisms and attacks on Orientalism too. We will know that, as I have done every time with you. I have given you all kinds of perspective and then left it up to you to decide which perspective you should make your own, or choose, or well, add to, innovate again. So I will give you those perspectives later throughout the course of our classes. But now it is Orientalism.
Ma'am, please sir একবার repeat করুন
কোনটা আচ্ছা, আমি এটাই কিছু বলিনি, মানে হ্যাঁ, আচ্ছা আমি কিছু সেরকম, আচ্ছা বলছি, আমি ইম্পর্টেন্ট সেরকম কিছু বলিনি। যেটা আমি বলছিলাম হলো যে Orientalism, what I will be teaching you is all of the perspectives that exists in context to Kipling's novel, which is not only limited to colonial reading, which is not only limited to a colonial discourse analysis, not only limited to Orientalism, but a major chunk of our discussion will be concentrated on this part, on Orientalism, that tenet of colonialism or colonial reading that is the most applicable for the assignment that we have at hand, that is Kipling's Kim. So what we need to know is understand what Orientalism is. How did Said shape or form this concept of Orientalism? And for that, the very first thing that we need to know are the differences. Since I have been saying that there are representations of the Orient, stereotypical representations of the Orient, then opposed to what? If I am representing Orient like this, then what is it offering, or what advantage does it cause to the opposite of the Orient, which is the West, which is known as the Occident? You must remember this, এটা just mone রাখবে that the East is Orient, the West is the Occident. So what are the differences? Yes, each is assumed, each of the Orient and the Occident, each is assumed to exist in opposition to the other. The Orient is conceived as being everything that the West is not. আমি তোমাদের হ্যামলেট পড়িয়েছি না? Did I teach you Hamlet? Yes or no? Please say.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have taught you Hamlet. So I hope you remember some of what I had taught you about the self and the other. Do you remember? Does anyone remember? Self and the other নিয়ে আমি একটা কিছু বলেছিলাম. Of course, it was in relation to Freud. Does any one of you remember any just whiff of memory that you get in your head? No one? That is very disappointing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Ruchi. Yes. Bolo. Say. Whatever you remember. Just the concept of the self and the other.
Oh, that the dominant one,
That the
like the Britishers, they are self. They want the
হচ্ছে না, কিছু শুনতে পাচ্ছি না. I cannot hear you.
to behave like them. They feel that they are inferior. I remember it.
I cannot hear you. কিচ্ছু শুনতে পাচ্ছি না. তোমার
I remember it with respect to the Huckleberry Finn thing.
Yes, sure. You can just say whatever you remember. Bolo.
Yeah, like the aunt and the others, the elders wanted him to be like him.
Yes.
Because or the leader to be like him because he is not like him. So that is the difference. But the day the other becomes the self, then there will be no difference. Then there will be an identity crisis.
Yes. Even though she has put it very simply, she is not wrong, because especially the last part that she said, the part of the identity crisis. Identity is a very big thing when it comes to reading of colonial discourses, because this is also derived. The ideas have, see, you have to understand that these people like Freud, who were discussing about the mind, they were so much important, they were so much new and so interesting and so exciting, kind of a taboo ideas that Freud was presenting. It influenced everything that was made post Freud. Literature post Freud changed completely in its approach. The way that we saw or read texts post Freud, post the publication of the interpretation of dreams, everything changed. And it is from his ideas that we gather the idea of the self and the other. But where does it fall here? Let's see. So as I said, the Orient is conceived as everything that the West is not. The Orient is everything that the West is not. The West is not savage. The Orient is. The West is not dirty, filthy, vernacular speaking, pluralistic religion worshipping, idol worshippers, ill-educated, uneducated, naked people running around everywhere. The West is not all these things. The Orient is. So the Orient at the very beginning is described, if I am to use Freud's terms over here, from the very beginning the Orient is described as a lack, as something that is not. If I am defining you as something that I am not, that's as something that I do not have or I do not possess, something that I am not, then you are a lack. Your description is an empty void, is a space, is a lack, which will be filled, the empty glass which will be filled by descriptions made by whom? Made by me. So I become the superior self and you become the subservient other. So you can see that this opposition is not of equal partners. Oppositions can be equal in power as well, but this is not an equal opposition that we see. The Orient is frequently described in a series of negative terms, and this serves this serves to flatter or buttress the sense of the West's superiority. It adds to the West's superiority and strength. If the West is assumed as the seat of knowledge and learning, then the Orient is the place of ignorance and naivety. Thus, in Orientalism, in this concept of Orientalism, East and West are positioned through the construction of an unequal dichotomy. This difference, they are unequal. The difference is not made on equal terms. That is, you are different from me because you are very well read in the in the plays of Shakespeare, and I am different from you by means that I am very well read in the plays of T.S. Eliot. So this is difference on equal terms, difference in the sections of our knowledge, not degrees of our knowledge. No one is saying that you know more and I know less. It's just that I know something else and you know something else. But here the difference between the Orient and the Occident is a difference of unequal dichotomy, because the Orient, as I said, is everything that the Occident is not. The West occupies a superior rank while the Orient is its other, in a subservient position. Orientalism reveals and by this system of this unequal differentiation, this system of otherizing the so-called inferior, the perceived inferior, perceived by whom? Perceived by the Occident or the West or the colonizers. This so-called so-called otherizing of the other, the otherizing of the Orient or the subservient, or otherizing of an Indian, putting it more specifically, this system of Orientalism, it has a certain twisted side as well. It has a certain upside, if you can call. Upside for us, by us I mean the scholars of literature, people who will be reading texts closely. This system has an upside. So what is that upside? Because Orientalism reveals more about those that describe the Orient than the people that are being described. Kipling, while describing India, or while describing the bazaars of India, while describing the people, the populace of India, is also revealing something about himself. It is this revelation where we focus, or where we put the fulcrum of colonial discourses. What the Occident is revealing about himself or herself or itself, while it is describing the Orient in all of these negative terms. This is what is most important. And this is what makes David Richards say that the representation of other cultures invariably entails the presentation of self-portraits, in that those people who are observed are overshadowed or eclipsed by the observer. What you can do is, I am writing it on the chat box, you can learn about this, you can do on your own, about the Oriental gaze. Because this is a very wide concept, this Oriental gaze. Can you see my message? Yes, I think you can see it now. Okay, this Oriental gaze, I am leaving it up to you to understand, because this is a huge concept. It has been applied to feminine. Yes, কেউ কিছু বলছো? আচ্ছা, this gaze is a huge concept because it has been applied to films, to visual culture. It has been applied to feminism. It has been, of course, used in psychoanalysis, used by Freud. It has been used by Said, and there are, I think, 2 to 3 other people. Now I know all of these things, so I can tell you them, but it's just very time consuming. So I would request you that it's not difficult to understand, because to me, to the internet is search karo, you will find websites where they have summarized all of these perspectives. So it will be easier if you read it on your own and not me tell it to you, because I will be more detailed and you really don't want to know all those things. So I'm leaving it up to you, but it is very interesting. Tomra jodi bolo, I can send you a link to some articles if you want. I can do that, which I will do. Okay, I will send them to you. I will post it on Classroom. So this is what the Oriental gaze, putting it very simply, is that the gaze is of the observer, right? The gaze is of the observer. So whenever the observer is observing, he is also revealing something about himself. He is also making himself naked. Okay. So the object, if I am to use some jargons over here, the object is objectified at the point of objectification, the point of time, the very moment that the colonizer looks at the colonized with an inferior gaze, it tells something about his character as well. This is what the Oriental gaze says, and this is what David Richards also says in the quote that you see in front of you. Just one moment. Yes. And Said stresses in his book Orientalism. I will send you the introductory portions of this book of Orientalism. Introduction ta podle you will have a very good idea of what Said wants to say, and since of course it is shorter than reading the entire book, I will send it to you. So Said says in his book, in this introduction, that the Orient has been fundamental in defining the West as its contrasting image, idea, personality, experience. All because the colonizer thought himself to be superior and in a superior position to define the Orient. It also gave the Orient a loophole, a chink in the armor to see the colonizers as well. So the Oriental gaze works both ways. When you are seeing someone, that someone is also seeing you, and it is that gaze which interacts with each other, which lets these two people see each other. And the important portion over here is that this each other that I am talking about, they are supposed to be posited in a superior and inferior position, but they become equal here right at this moment of the gaze when they can both observe each other. But the Occident is not aware of it because it is egotistical, because it thinks that it is superior. So it is not aware that my objectifying of the Orient also makes me vulnerable for scrutiny. And that is exactly what we are doing. We are scrutinizing the Occident in its representing of the Orient. That is what we are writing back to them. Kipling wrote about India and gave it to us. We are reading his book and telling him what he is. That is the success of post-colonial discourse analysis, or the success of Orientalism. So up to this, is it clear? I have 5 more minutes. You have a class, right? You have a class after this. Up to this, is it clear? Anyone has any question? Please be quick and ask. Okay, moving on then. Now, this Orientalism, I'm sorry, just one moment, I lost it. Yes. So even though Orientalism talks about these representations that have been made permanent into our culture, it is still a fabricated truth. It is still a Western fantasy. It is very important to grasp Said's argument that Western views of the Orient, just one moment, yes, that it is important to understand that the Western views of the Orient are not always based on what is observed to exist in the Oriental lands. What Kipling actually saw with his own eyes, tangibly and concretely, what he saw and observed, his representations of India is not limited to that physical observation. Why am I saying this? Because you will find contemporary examples. Dekho, why post-colonialism is still relevant today. Watch the movie Eat, Pray, Love. Watch the movie Delhi Express. I think there is a movie called the Delhi Express. Watch Aishwarya Rai Bachchan's Pride and Prejudice. Watch all the movies, Hollywood movies, that have taken turns to be shot in India, and you will see that they have this exoticized view of India. Watch a very good movie, I'll tell you. I'll give you the name of the movie. The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Watch this movie. You will see how this movie is made by an English person, right? So what he sees, or what he or she saw in India, his concept of India is not limited to those observations. His concept of India is very exoticized. You see, if India is a land of snake charmers and superstition, is a land of the occult, is a land where Ayurveda is, even though America is saying that it's theirs. So, and India is this country, and the West is so scientific, so logical, so rational. It believes in evidence, it believes in proof. Then you must understand that India as a place, as a land, is very exotic and very mysterious for the West. It is precisely because the lingua franca, that is the language of English, every text that has been written in English and read by the Westerners, by the people living in the West, all those texts, they have been written in these stereotyped representative language. And this is a circle, this is a cycle, everything is linked to each other. They represent it in that stereotypical ways because they refuse to understand that we are a dynamic people, as any person in this world. They refuse to accept, because at the very beginning they have already told themselves that we are superior. And the literature, the texts, the studies, the criticisms that have followed since the first time that the British stepped foot on India, all the history that has followed has limited our descriptions to this typical stereotypical representations. And so even now India is a place where you come to have to meditate. Just imagine, even now India is a place where you come to meditate, as you saw in Eat, Pray and Love. If you have seen, you will see it's a very famous movie, right? It's based on a very famous book. So imagine the number of readers it has reached, and imagine the number of viewers a movie of Julia Roberts reaches. So even today, anyone who does not live in India will see India as that place where this woman comes to give off steam, to let off steam, to meditate. India is only a land of meditation for them. So it is a fabricated image that we have. It is an exoticized view that we have. Orientalism is first and foremost a fabricated construct, a series of images that come to stand as the Orient's reality for those living in the West. This contrived reality in no way reflects what may or may not be actually present in the Orient itself. It does not exist outside of these stereotypical representations that have been made by the West only. It is not us who have represented ourselves like this. Made by the West, and they read it and they keep that in their memory. And since they have the power of the language with them, the language that circulates seamlessly throughout this entire goddamn world, they keep those representations stereotyped and closed off. They refuse to change their view of India, and since they are so influential, the West is so influential in the world economy, India still remains a land of snake charmers to the entire world. But you and I, we know better. So that is why I said that the Western views of the Orient are not based on what is actually observed. Crucially, its creation from the stuff of fantasy does not make it any less remote from the world. Orientalism, it is fundamentally imaginative. It is imaginative because the West imagines the Orient to be this, but the consequences, the results, they are very much real. They are very much materialistic. And I will